So thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Teen Talks. We are in season 2 episode. Host Samina Parveen, and today's episode is with Prarthana, and I'm so happy to have you here today.
Hi,
So
Samina. Thank you so much for having me.
yes, so Prarthana is a brilliant artist who has numerous videos with her touch of desiness, and she's also an amazing writer, and not to mention a great poet and a wonderful storyteller. And she has so many relatable and touching videos, and she has a very cool wardrobe, not to mention for yeah, for sure, and a very kind-hearted person. And thank you so much for being an icon to so many young people.
Thank you, Samina. I think that's the nicest introduction I've ever received. No one's ever called me a writer before. So you are definitely inflating my ego on many different levels. So, yes, thank you.
No, but honestly, I've seen your posts and captions itself are like, sounds like poetry to me. I'm a poet, so yeah, it is very good.
Thank you.
So could you please tell our audience a little more about yourself and the amazing work you do?
So I think Samina's introduction didn't leave much left for me to say. But one of the things that I mainly focus on is queer content. So I identify as queer myself. I'm part of the LGBTQI community, and I'm also Desi. So I try to create content that sort of represents the intersection of those two identities, because you don't see a lot of people even being openly gay, and if you do, they are usually from you know s- countries like Australia or America or the UK. There's not a lot of people who come in from like Asian countries and especially Indian countries. So my content just aims at creating some relatable and funny content that might appeal to someone else who also might be desi and queer.
Yes, that is great, and we really appreciate you doing the work. And as you know that we run a mental health platform, and while I was looking for more people to speak from the LGBTQ plus community, I had really a hard time looking for people because there is this huge stigma that how will kids be able to understand something so sophisticated and huge. And in my opinion, I think teenagers can understand it from a very early age, and ignorance is not the right way to educate them. So, what would be some of your thoughts about that?
I think you're absolutely right. I think that there's no reason to keep this topic of, the LGBTQI community hidden at any point in time. It's not like something, look, what are the things you can't say to someone until they're 18? Okay, maybe you can't talk about sex, and maybe you can't let them vote, and maybe you can't let them drive in certain countries. Saying that, oh, hey, I'm a woman who's attracted to other women, or, I'm a man who's attracted to other men, that isn't really something scandalous you're telling people. It's a very natural deviation like a lot of people have. It's a biological thing that some people are attracted to different genders. Some people are part of the trans community and they're not the same gender that their body is born with biologically. And there's all really natural things that we see throughout history. So to say that, oh, it's not something you should talk to children about, you're corrupting their minds, what you're doing then is just displaying your homophobia and your transphobia. You're saying that this is something so scandalous that you don't think children should be exposed to it, and that's ridiculous. You would have a much better chance of making that child feel better, making yourself feel better, and making like millions of like people from the LGBTQI community feel better if you just spoke about it like it's no big deal. Because homophobia is a very thought it's something that you teach people. You're not born homophobic, you're not really born racist or sexist. All of these grounds of discrimination are usually something you teach people over time. You see children see how others behave and mimic those behaviors. So naturally none of us are born with hatred based on any of those factors. So I think you should give children the benefit of the doubt, especially teenagers, and just let them talk about it and know about it, because it'll help them and it'll stop all so much ignorance from building up when you are an older person.
That is so true. And that the thing you said about we are not born with these kind of thoughts, and we are taught them. And I guess that reminded me of one of my lines from one of my own poems that I would love to quote, which is that I was told that differences existed from birth. I wasn't born with my thoughts. You shaped the pot and made it half hollow. That is a line, and I think that is the exact case with homophobia and anything. Like, people teach love at such a young age, but still they do not want to teach about the LGBTQ plus community, and that's such a two-way thing to say, because you're ready to teach them about love but not this. So I think that line is one of my favorite lines I've ever written, because I feel like that is the case with so many things going around in the world. And how do you think that it plays an important role in the mental well-being of teenagers?
So I think first off, I need to tell you that that line is absolutely gorgeous, and I think I would love to read more of your poetry. And how do I think it affects the mental health of teenagers? I mean, look, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You're making a teenager who already has a lot of, new and complex emotions going on, a lot of new feelings, a lot of like maybe physical awkwardness, all of these things, trying to discover stuff like romantic relationships and everything for the very first time. And along with all of that, you are not even willing to have conversations with them about so many things, about sex, about the LGBTQI community, about, letting them have opinions about what they want to do for themselves, by themselves. And specifically for me, when I was a teenager myself, I actually came into my teens already knowing that I was queer. So I had like lingering suspicions, and then around 14 or 15 years old, I was like, oh, for sure, like I am not exclusively attracted to men, I'm also really attracted to women. And it was extremely difficult to go through. It was mentally damaging. And because, you face a lot of isolation, you feel like, because, no one's talking to you about it, you think that in feeling these feelings of queerness, you are alone in feeling them. So that caused a lasting impact. Like, I'm still trying to figure out how much of my personality and behaviors and like social actions are still somehow rooted in the fact that I had to keep that huge part of myself a big secret at a very young age. And that's like the sort of impact that it's had on my mental health, and I think could have on any teenager's mental health if they're grappling with things like coming to terms with their gender and their sexuality. You're going to have people who are very anxious because there's so much guilt and embarrassment and like trying to cover up that comes with trying to hide your sexuality or gender identity, that you're going to probably develop like some high level stress and maybe even anxiety. And then with those feelings of guilt and isolation, like that would translate into like maybe developing some symptoms of depression because it's so difficult to deal with all of that by yourself. And I think another major factor that can always be there is like when you're a teenager, you're studying, right? You're in like this pretty crucial part of your life where you're making life decisions about how you want to live, what you want to study, who you want to be. And you're pressured to make all of those decisions at a pretty young age. And you don't have a lot of time then to put into your work and your education and your schooling when you're so worried about something as basic as your sexuality and gender. For me personally, I had no idea what my future was going to look like because I didn't know whether my parents would accept me, I didn't know whether I would have friends. And thinking all of those things, I didn't really bother much about, oh, tomorrow at school I have homework. What homework? My parents might kick me out of the house tomorrow. I don't care about homework. So, you do take the focus away. I remember when I had career days and stuff, I would think of it as a joke, like, oh yeah, what career will I have? Because I had no idea. I couldn't envision a future for myself. And I think that's one of the most harmful things because, you take a child and you don't even give it any idea of what its future can look like. And it's very unfair for anyone who's struggling with their gender and sexuality at, that teenage phase. I think it's especially harmful to their physical, mental, and like emotional health.
That is such a daunting thought that summarizes it all. That, how it affects the very basic thing about what will my future look like. And maybe especially in this country uh, where things are not that favorable. And I think with that, I really liked how you mentioned that, people think it's like keeping a big secret. And moving on to the next question, which is related to the same thing, that coming out is always portrayed as such a big event in your life. And after which everything seems to like settle and everything will come in line, and maybe like your life will fall in place. And I know that desi queers have a very hard time with it. It's so much more complicated than western, how the western media portrays it. They portray it as like, one scene and one moment in your life, and after that it's just gonna change your life forever. And I think every young queer person has thought that scene. Like, I have seen one of your videos and you had mentioned how queer kids plan their escape. Maybe I can move to a foreign country, I can do this, I can do that. It's very scary and a lifelong decision for so many teens. So what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it is a scary thing for sure, especially in a society that hasn't accepted it. I feel like most desi queer people, when they come out, they're the first queer person that's ever openly existed in their families. They don't have like aunts or uncles or siblings or anyone to sort of model after or look up to. You're the first person, quite possibly, in your family to be openly queer. you know Previous generations, being openly queer wasn't even an option. It would be met with severe violence. They might have been not even part of a family anymore. And so what you're doing is quite revolutionary. And there's a lot of pride and courage to be taken in the fact that what you're doing is revolutionary. But it's also extremely scary because you don't have any role models. You don't have any like success stories that you can be like, oh yeah, yeah, I can be like them, everything will work out okay. You hardly have any of those things. So I think that that's why coming out can be very scary, because once again, it feels like you're doing it alone. It feels like, there's no guarantee that your friends and family will accept you. And generally, of course, it's a very nerve-wracking thing. We're very social beings, and to think that our social reputation can be completely tarnished and you can be hated on by like family members and friends just because of one small part of your personality that you have no control over. It's terrifying. But I think like a lot of things in life, like how you're saying, oh, that one moment of coming out is considered like very important and you can't mess it up and this and that. I don't think there's only one moment. I think media and people in general just really like to oversimplify things as, that one moment where everything just changes. But it's not true. Like, even like, let's say, other important things that can happen in your life, like, I don't know, falling in love for the first time. It's not like one moment that will change your life. It's a series of moments, and you keep sticking to your convictions that you really like this person, and that's how you make your relationship work. And even with coming out, it's not like one moment you come out, especially with Indian parents, because they love to brush it under the carpet. You kind of have to maybe come out a couple more times than that. You have to like really have a lot of belief in yourself to, handle everyone else's doubts, because people will doubt you when you come out. They'll be like, are you sure? Maybe you're just bisexual, or maybe you aren't bisexual, maybe you're just straight. Maybe it's a phase. Like, they will try to downplay it and belittle it. And I think that's a common reaction that a lot of brown people get when they come out. It's not met with overt violence, overt like, you're horrible, get out of my house. It's met with like, no, you're not gay, you don't know what you're talking about, you're too young. So you're made to doubt yourself, which is almost more difficult to deal with sometimes than just dealing with complete negativity and aggression. You're made to doubt your own sense of sanity and belief in your own feelings. So that can also be very difficult to deal with. But yes, I think it's a series of moments. So in thinking that, hopefully it takes the pressure off of ever having to come out, to anyone listening to this who might be wanting to come out. I think that, I mean, even if you're starting a business or something, it's not like one moment that defines whether the business is going to be a success or not. It's a series of moments that your conviction matters. So I do hope that to anyone who's coming out, they just know that it's really going to be okay. And so many people have done it. And even the people who you really think are not going to understand, they can come around and they can accept you. And if they don't, then it's okay, because as long as you've accepted yourself, that is the most important thing.
That is so true. And I would like to add on to the last sentence you said, that maybe just come out when you're in a safe place, and you know, a safer place, then you know the best for yourself, and just take care of the time you come out and just be safe would be my advice. Because so many people think that, once I've accepted myself, I need to tell everyone. I need to, you know, prove them this or that. So just don't do it in a hurry. Just see what you need and just be safe again. And then
Yeah,
one more
absolutely.
thing.
I think that, okay, yeah, please.
No, no, please go
Go on.
ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say that, yeah, it's so true. I got caught up in talking about the other aspects of coming out, but you're absolutely right, Samina. I don't think anyone should ever come out just because it's the romanticized thing to do or you think you're supposed to do it. You have to make sure, like, you maybe you're financially independent, you're in a physically safe place, you have some sort of social support, and maybe some place that you can go to that isn't just, your guardian's house, so that you can always be physically safe, if nothing else. So yes, you're absolutely right. There's never any compulsion to come out or do it in any rush.
Yes. And I think with teenagers, like if suppose one of your friends is coming out to you, what would be some of the ways that we can normalize teenagers accepting others? Because I think so many people talk about coming out, but what was something that you had expected from your friends, which maybe you found, like which maybe you got or not got, but what was something that you expect from others to accept while coming out?
So yeah, my experience with coming out to my friends was quite pleasant because they didn't make a big deal of it, and they didn't make me feel differently afterwards. After I had come out to them, they continued to treat me like I was the same person, and I think that's the most important thing I would expect out of anyone, especially someone who's a teenager right now who's having like friends come out to them. Just don't even bat an eyelid about it, don't start cracking jokes unless the other person starts cracking jokes. Don't like start referring to them as your gay friend. Don't make it a big deal, make it a big deal in showing how much you care about them. And maybe like meet them more often, and just be like, just be ready for open to conversation. That kind of stuff is nice, but don't like make a big deal of it, or don't make it about yourself. A lot of people take it personally. Like, let's say I have a friend and that friend hasn't come out to me for a very long time. I've known them for almost 6 7 years, and then they come up to me and they say, "Hey, I'm gay. I've known since like 4 or 5 years. I'm telling you now." And I'm like, "Oh, you've known for 4 or 5 years? Why didn't you think you could tell me? Amn't I such a close friend of yours? You didn't think I was cool enough to be chill with it? Oh, of course I'll be chill with it." I'm making it about myself, I'm not making it about the other person who just told me like life altering important news. I'm just thinking about myself. So please make sure that everything you do, you're doing for the other person. Don't do anything, exclusively for yourself, to make yourself feel better, to make yourself feel like a good ally, to make yourself feel very like, cool and like accepting. It's not about you. So I think that's the number one thing I would expect from people. And also I think expect from younger generations like not a lot of homophobia and transphobia, because I mean really you have all of the information and knowledge at your fingertips, and there's so many more openly queer people living like good successful lives now. So I really do hope that homophobia and transphobia continues to be more and more of a thing of the past. I know it's never going to be like 100%, a generation of people who are 100% cool with it, but hopefully it's much better than previous generations who didn't have access to the same knowledge and information as we do now.
That's such a great thing to bring up, the part you said about not making it about yourself and just caring for the other person. So, moving on to the next question, I had read your caption about the newspaper article you got published. First of all, congratulations. And secondly, the caption got tears to my eyes because it was so beautiful. And like you had said, this hide and seek game seems so familiar in Indian households. So, first of all, I would like to share few words from your caption. She was reading the article when I walked in. I don't know who sent it to her. She barely said a word. It felt like I was coming out to her all over again. I hid in my room for the rest of the morning, sneaking out at lunchtime only when I was sure she left. That's the thing parents never understand. You come out to them and they worry about what everyone else will say. about how difficult society will make your life for you. Parents never seem to understand that their acceptance is worth more than any stranger's hate or approval. They are the difference between a happy queer child and a sad one. So that captures so many emotions for so many desi queers I know. And I think parent support is very essential, especially for teens, since they are financially and emotionally dependent on them. So, what would you like to say about the same?
Um, well, first of all, thank you for reading it out in your podcast. And yeah, I do think I tried to maybe really capture how I felt in that moment when I saw my mother reading that article like come out about me, openly saying that I'm an LGBTQIA person and I create LGBTQIA centered content. And I think, yeah, that's the thing with Indian parents. I truly do believe that the way they react to this kind of news about their children is very different than how, someone who's brought up in like a more Western culture would react, would have their parents react. Just a culture is just a slightly different. Like, I feel like they see and brown parents just have like this more protectiveness over their child, usually, not 100% of cases, but usually they're a lot more protective of their child. They're a lot more involved in their children's decision making, like, whether it's your career, whether it's the partner that you pick out for your, marriage, and just in general, most of the decisions you make, your parents are more involved. And that's a really nice thing also, because you get their input. Sometimes your parents can be, valuable advice givers, but most of the time, they don't really understand what younger people go through. And the worst part is they don't care to understand. They don't care to actually respect a younger person's thoughts or emotions or feelings. They tend to write it off. Maybe they were treated like that when they were teenagers. They had all their genuine thoughts and emotions just written off by their own parents. So they think it's only natural to do the same thing sometimes. And I feel like, the reaction to coming out, having just like this fear of what society is going to say, is a very Indian thing. Because, like, if you look at some very stereotypical reactions that you can expect in maybe an American household when the child comes out to its parents, it's going to be like, oh, what will our religion think of this? Or you're you're going against our religion or something like that. There's a lot of different like ways to hate on the LGBTQIA community. And I think religion, society, biology, they're all different ways. And I feel like in desi households, it tends to primarily be about what society is going to say about you, because we care a lot about our reputations in society. And everything you do is like how you're affecting the family name, and how our family household is going to look after this action of yours. My mother never really said like, oh, you are upsetting me. She said, how will I talk to my friends about this? What if they find out? What if relatives find out? That's all she really cared about. I really started to wonder, what did she even want? Like, what was it making her feel that her daughter was gay? She just seemed to care about what her friends would think that her daughter is gay. I was like, that's so weird. Like, so, yeah, I think caring about society's expectations and their reaction is extremely like exaggerated in like brown and desi households. So I do feel like, yeah, it does create a really like difficult situation to be in. And I feel like it's just sad, going about your entire life worrying about what other people think of you. It's so exhausting. And I feel like that's one of the nice parts about coming out. Maybe in some way you are detaching yourself from truly caring about what society thinks of you, because you already committed like the ultimate blunder. So now you can do whatever you like, whether it's your career or your hair or your fashion. You just don't have to care what people think, because they're gonna hate on you just for being gay. So be the weirdest gay person you can imagine, because who cares anymore? So yeah, that's what I have to say about brown parents reacting to kids coming out.
I really appreciate you saying that, people are already gonna judge you for this one thing, so do anything else. I really like that thing. And I think with brown people, it's like the society is so involved in your life, maybe from the time you were born. You know, they kind of consider themselves a part of the decision somehow. I don't know how, but I think that is one of the things which I think is not the case with people coming out in other countries, because they are sometimes detached from their parents or relatives or people like that. So I think that is one of the things which you really pointed out with this. And I hope I had done justice to your words by reading them out. And it was a great job at, capturing so many emotions. And I loved how it ended. The difference line is so true. I really i really enjoyed it. And then I would like to move on to the next question, which is, I have seen so many of your videos, and one of them was how about, you had like short hair and boycott in school. And I know there's a taboo about certain way you look, and you had mentioned in your video that this was, a running joke in your school type of thing, that you are standing in girls line and people would say that, you're a boy, why are you standing in girls line, something like that. And with suits or styles or appearance, society loves to taunt everyone on that. And I vividly remember that I had like a boycott in LKG, and people used to make fun of me. So I really appreciated that, you are talking about it. And I always felt like I remember one more of the incidents, which was that I had like a Spider-Man bag or something, which my parents bought because I really liked red color in general. And kids somehow made fun of me. And I did not have that type of feeling, this is girls' thing, this is boys' thing. But that very moment started to make me believe in something like that exists. And schools are the very first places students learn about the binary thing. And it's not just that, it's more than that. So what would be your thought about it? How does this impact kids?
Yeah, I think it's horrible. And I'm sorry people made fun of your Spider-Man bag. I'm sure it was super cool and they were just jealous. But yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking. You have someone who's so young and not able to really people go their entire lifetimes not still worrying about what people are going to say about them and how they're going to be reacted to, how their decisions are going to be judged. Now imagine a child having to go through that. It's like 10 times worse. So I think it can be very nerve wracking to find out that there is this set way of doing things that you had no idea about, because you didn't interact with, before going to school, you don't often interact with a lot of other people your age, and you don't know what is the right way and what is the wrong way, what boys are supposed to be like and what girls are supposed to be like. And usually that's something that comes in later on in life when you're starting your schooling. So it can be very jarring to uh, just walk into a room and suddenly somehow you're doing everything wrong. And that's how maybe a lot of people have felt, how you felt perhaps in LKG because of your hair, and how I felt as well when I walked into like my first grade classroom for the very first time. All the girls had long hair, all of them didn't have a problem wearing that skirt. And these were all people who, to this day, will appear very feminine if you meet them, and will be wearing eyeliner and kajal and all of that. And, it just happened to be that this gender stereotype and expectation worked for them, at least in terms of expression and fashion, it worked for them. And it wasn't working for me. Like, very naturally, I'm just a person who leaned towards a different sense of fashion and style. And I lean towards that sense of wanting shorter hair and like red color clothing and black color clothing and comfortable t-shirts and pants from a very young age, from like 3 or 4 years old. Like, when I asked my mother for my first haircut, I was only 3 years old. So that's an extremely young person. I didn't even know the alphabet yet, but I knew how I wanted my hair to look. So you really must understand that this sense of style and fashion and presentation is extremely inherent, and it can show up at an extremely young age. And I think it proves that it's a very, like, natural inherent thing then, because it's not like you were influenced by anyone. It's not like you decided something is cool and you wanted to do it. It's just how you naturally are as a person. And I think we really need to respect that, even when it's with children. I think we only start respecting people once they reach a certain age and we start respecting their decisions to some extent. But with children, you just don't care. You just make them wear whatever you want. You make them do whatever they want. You just don't care. You're just a child. Get over it. Like, it's not my problem. And it's very cruel to children because you're kind of like nipping their sense of person and their uniqueness as a person right at the bud. And I think the gender binary is one of the best ways that the uniqueness of people is just sort of like snipped off at the bud and they're made to feel really bad. And yeah, it can have, I think, a lasting impact on that person. Either that person just is very hateful, or goes out of their way then to fit into these gender binaries because they know the pain of being socially excluded, or they end up becoming very into themselves and very scared of other people because they don't want to get bullied, they don't want to have that sort of reaction come to them. So whatever the scenario is, when you're forcing a child to do something and look like something that naturally inherently the child doesn't want to look like, you're gonna, I think, cause like some lasting damage. And I think that all of those children bullying other children, saying, hey, why do you look like this, why is your hair short, go stand in the girls line, boys line, I'm sure they were just mimicking what teachers or parents would have taught them about what's okay to say and what's not okay to say. So I do think that these are learned behaviors usually. I mean, I'm sure that child also would have been scolded for not playing with a girl's toy, or don't cry, you're a boy, or you go sit quietly in a corner, you're just a girl. So many things were told that like inherently sexist. So yeah, I do think that it's a learned behavior and it can cause a lot of harm in children.
Yes, that is so true. And I feel like, yes, these are learned behaviors. And I think it comes with parents and teachers constantly telling those things to kids. And at a point, they start believing them. And I feel like now that I know so much about this, once I sit in my class and some teacher says something like, you're a girl, don't do that, don't do this, I feel like, oh my God, they are so wrong. And I think that is one of the things which I feel like is an improvement. And I think one of the things which really helped me was the media lacked so much representation, and I can proudly say that you're one of the first lesbians I saw on the internet. And you know and one reel I saw of yours was wearing about a itchy, like which one to choose among clothes, and you were like, should I wear this suit or this itchy lehenga? And I was like, finally someone is talking about it. And like you said for the previous answer, first of all, I love your fashion sense. I love to see all your new wardrobe collections on Instagram. And I think that is the kind of media representation that I think you're giving to so many young people. And that's such a great thing. And thank you for doing that. So moving on to the next question, which is Teen Talks question of the day. It's a question we ask everyone who comes on the show, and it is that, how do you, like, if you could say any one thing to your younger self about any myth related to mental health, what would you say and why?
I think if I had to tell my younger self something about mental health, I'd probably tell her that it's okay that you feel so different than other people and you feel like your brain literally works differently than other people. It's normal, and there are other people who feel that way too, and you're not weird or wrong for feeling more like being by yourself, more like staying in your room, or more awkward in social situations. You have a lot of things going against you in terms of how society judges people, so don't worry about it and you'll be fine. And go to therapy, it's really really good for you. So please, like, don't ever think that these mental health things are something that can't affect you. They can affect anyone. So it's important to always be careful of it and take care of yourself in that regard.
Thank you so much for sharing such a great advice. And I think with teenagers and mental health, it's something that they go through, but still are alien about the concept. And that is something we are trying to achieve with whatever work we do. So, lastly, what would you like to tell our audience about Inertia teams?
I think I'd like to say that it's a wonderfully curated program, and it's probably the most like interactive podcast recording or conversation I've ever had. So thank you, Samina, for having me on Inertia Teens. It was really my pleasure and my honor to be here. And I can't wait to check out the episode. I can't wait to check out more of your episodes because this is how you're making them so interactive and so like well researched. I would love to check out more of your episodes. And Thank you. I really hope that we can work together soon again.
Sure, I hope the same. And thank you so much for being a part of our episode. And I'm sure our audience learned a lot today. And it's very essential that we implement these in our lives. Maybe if you're watching it as an adult and still you found out our episode and learned something, you can still, apply that in your life. There is no age to it. And thank you so much.